Well, let's start with Canberra, because obviously we see them all the time, but Scott Morrison's been up front and centre. How have you thought he's gone?
I think he's done really well. Let's not forget he started the year under a bit of a cloud, I think at times unfairly, over his handling of the bushfire crisis. Of course, he spent that first couple of weeks, or first week perhaps, in Hawaii on a family vacation. Whoa, big crime. Leaving the country in the control of one or two others who probably didn't step up to the plate and do the job that he would have liked them to do. That aside, during the COVID-19, which is, all we've got to really judge them on for the remains of the year, because it's the thing that's occupied our mind most, I think he's been really measured. And if I can use a cricket analogy, knowing that you'll be at the SCG for much of the day dealing with millions of your fans, it's like I'm here to support you, Tim. They've just stuck it outside off stump, and they've done it for 20 or 30 overs, and every time it's been there, ScoMo's just looked at it go past and thought, right, fair enough. So he hasn't fallen victim to any attack from the other side. He's essentially kept the country in pretty good shape comparatively. He went early with the borders. He copped a bit of a serve over that, but it was the right thing to do. So come the end of the year, even though the budget is nowhere near where he'd like it to be, I think he'd be pretty satisfied. And I mean, the popularity polls or the opinion polls certainly suggest that's the case. Tim?
Yes, OK, well, let's look at Greg Hunt. We just saw some vision of the Health Minister walking with Scott Morrison, and his profile has certainly lifted through the course of the past 12 months.
Again, really measured, Tim, don't you think? I mean, I've probably, as you have, interviewed Greg Hunt in different portfolios and as an opposition spokesman over many years, and he's, again, someone that doesn't seem to get too ruffled. He's been across the science, and I think he did in university. He did, major, if you will, in a science portfolio. So he is across ground with which he might be somewhat familiar. But again, very measured. He's got things done. With the vaccine, they did a deal with some overseas suppliers, even having some made here in Australia eventually. So I think it'd be pretty tough, given, again, comparatively, how well Australia's done, to report anything negative about Greg Hunt. I think he's done a good job. OK,
let's go to the States, and this is where we're going to get some interesting responses. Because,
oh, boy.
Are you one that stands with Dan? Dan Andrews, of course, what a year for Melbourne, a very dark winter.
Yeah. Mate, it doesn't matter if I stand with Dan, because I'll never get to vote for him unless I, for some reason, move to Victoria. I lived there about 10 years ago for a few years. So the polls are really interesting, because if you live in the state and you are polled, and that's really the only polling they do, I'd love to see some polling, Tim, where they ask the rest of the country what they think of the state leaders. But what you can't argue about Dan Andrews is, even though people say, oh, how wonderful, he funded press conferences for 6 months, how good. He's got to walk into a room and stand in front of a camera. It's actually not that hard. He did deal with some difficult questions, and he batted them off as he would. He's a very accomplished politician. But the fact remains that through government negligence, 800 plus people died. And you can't mark that. You can't mark that anything other than a fail. The hotel quarantine was a mess. They then had an inquiry, and although my personal view is Judge Coate conducted the inquiry as best as she could, she wasn't given the powers to seize documents and the like, which would have shed light on who the hell screwed it up, who called for private security, who decided to go against the model that was working, for example, in New South Wales. Now, if I'm in Victoria, I think the numbers are something like 80%, 75, 80% stand with Dan. Good on you. He's your premier. You get to vote for him. But from across the border, if you will, I can't even pass. I can't pass him. I think it's a fail.
Yeah, our thoughts are with Queensland at the moment, a difficult time, and hopefully we'll be able to navigate through it. Of course, Brisbane in a 3-day lockdown. Annastacia Palaszczuk has been in the middle of an election heavily criticised for inconsistency, particularly in and around who was allowed in, who wasn't allowed in. The AFL looked like they're up there doing media conference at golf courses, and then people with genuine reasons to jump across the border couldn't get there. What do you make of her?
Well, again, Queenslanders love her. They voted her back in as Premier with an increased majority just a month or two back. My view from across the border is that she went too hard too early. Easy for me to say. She runs the line saying, I'm trying to keep Queenslanders safe. And Queenslanders who get to employ her or not say, thank you very much, Annastacia. Where I think there's a deficit, if I might, Tim, is in the compassion area. Because even though this is very dangerous and we know that it can spread very quickly, we've seen a daughter come from Canberra, no infections at the time, none for 28 days, and for some reason she had to isolate for a fortnight, even though she was prepared to get tested and the like. She was visiting Queensland to attend the funeral of her father. We had a terminally ill brain cancer patient who was sent south for treatment. He wasn't going to come back to Queensland and all of a sudden do laps of Indooroopilly shopping centre. He was going to go home and spend his last weeks there. He had trouble coming back. I think people from across the borders see that and think, gee, that is pretty heartless. And just yesterday, Tim, as you know, when we were at work, this was going on, the lockdown that Brisbane's in right now, the number of people that were driving out of Brisbane, heading to the Sunshine Coast, heading to the Gold Coast, and there was seemingly no plan. I spoke to the Health Minister yesterday, Yvette Darth, who, again, seems quite capable, but there's just a few little things around the edges that go, gee, that's untidy. But I think in the score of compassion, you've got to give Palaszczuk a pass on the numbers, but I just wish she'd been a bit more compassionate to some of those people trying to get back home. Yeah,
the greatest challenge may still be in front of Annastacia Palaszczuk right at the moment.
True.
All right, we'll do this quickly because we're jammed for time, but Gladys Berejiklian, it seemed like Dodgy Darrell was her greatest Achilles heel through the course of it. And Mark McGowan, old mate, Mark McGowan in Western Australia.
They love him. 90% approval in the Essential poll out a month or two back. He doesn't muck around. It's like it's a guillotine. Righto, we're shut. Righto, we're shut. One case, we're shut. You can't come here. But they love him there. I don't know. The numbers look good, and from the West Australians' point of view, well done. In regards to Gladys, she's kept the place essentially open. She was hopeless at choosing a man. We've all made mistakes in life. I'm prepared to forgive her there. I don't even for a moment think that. I don't think she's dodgy in any way. So I think she'll sail through. I hope she'll sail through ICAC. People support her, and I think she's probably, unfortunately, because the Prime Minister said New South Wales was the gold standard, she's got state of origin dislike from around the country. But here in this state in New South Wales, very popular and up again in the recent survey. Tim?
There's many other politicians we could have spoken about, but time has killed us. Luke Grant, I appreciate you coming in with your report card today.